Carl Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, and he uncovered something truly disturbing. Toxic people don't just attack you randomly. They identify specific patterns in your behavior, patterns that allow them to drain your energy, manipulate your emotions, and utterly destroy your inner peace. And the worst part, most victims don't even realize they're being torn apart until it's far too late. That strange feeling you get around certain people, Jung gave it a name. It's your unconscious mind trying to warn you of a danger that your conscious mind hasn't yet identified. And in this video, you're going to learn the 7 strategies that Jung taught to psychologically protect yourself from narcissists, manipulators, and toxic people. This isn't about being paranoid. It's about being strategic with your emotional energy. Because Jung discovered that psychological protection isn't a luxury, it's a basic necessity for anyone who wants to maintain their sanity in a world full of people who drain, control, and destroy. And before you think this doesn't apply to you, let me show you the data. Recent research between 2020 and 2025 has confirmed what Jung already knew. People who don't establish clear psychological boundaries end up developing anxiety, depression, and even physical illnesses caused by the chronic stress of toxic relationships. Over 70% of people who leave destructive relationships report that they ignored obvious red flags early on because they didn't know how to identify toxic behaviors. And when they finally realize it, they've already lost years of peace, energy, and mental health. Jung taught that the biggest mistake you can make is thinking that toxic people will change if you're just patient enough, understanding enough, or loving enough. They won't, because the problem isn't you, it's in their deep psychological structure, in what Jung called their unintegrated shadow self. So, if you've ever felt emotionally exhausted after talking to someone, if you've ever doubted your own sanity because someone constantly distorts reality, if you've ever repeatedly sacrificed yourself for someone who never reciprocated, you need the 7 forms of protection that Jung developed. And the first strategy will shatter the most dangerous illusion that you carry about toxic people. Strategy 1. Recognize the false public persona. Jung discovered that every human being uses a public persona, a social mask, that we present to the world. This is normal and healthy. The problem is when someone uses an overly elaborate, an overly perfect public persona that hides an inner rot. Toxic people are masters at creating enchanting personas. In the beginning, they seem charismatic, attentive, genuinely interested in you. Jung called this the love-bombing stage, where the narcissist puts you on a pedestal only to knock you down later. And here's the signal that Jung taught to identify. Observe the difference between how the person presents themselves publicly and how they act in private. If the mask changes drastically when there's no audience, you're dealing with a false public persona designed to manipulate. Studies of Jungian psychology confirm the more perfect the public persona presented initially, the deeper the hidden shadow self. And when that shadow emerges, chaos is inevitable. Jung said that authentic people have coherence between their public persona and their true self. The social mask may vary a little, depending on the context, but the essence remains. Toxic people have a complete rupture. The public persona is radiant. The private self is manipulative, controlling, destructive. And if you've noticed that someone in your life completely changes personality depending on who's present, Jung would warn you, this person is showing you who they really are when they think no one important is watching. Believe that version, not the mask. But recognizing the false public persona is just the first step. Because even knowing this, many people remain trapped. And that's where the second form of protection comes in. And this will give you the power that you've lost without realizing it. Strategy 2. Establish firm psychological boundaries. Jung taught that boundaries aren't just about what you say no to. They're about establishing energetic and emotional barriers that toxic people cannot cross. Here's the problem. You were taught that being good means being available always. That love means constant sacrifice. That understanding means accepting any behavior. And toxic people exploit exactly that belief. Recent research from 2020-2025 on boundary setting has confirmed something brutal. The biggest difficulty isn't knowing you need boundaries. It's feeling like you deserve to have them. And toxic people actively work to destroy your sense of worthiness. Jung discovered 3 types of essential boundaries that you need to establish immediately. Time boundary. Your time is your most valuable resource. If someone constantly demands your immediate availability, but is never available to you, Jung would call that energy vampirism, and you have the right to say, "I can't right now, maybe later," without justifying, without apologizing, just stating a decision. Emotional boundary. You are not responsible for anyone's feelings other than your own. If someone blames you for how they feel, manipulates you with fabricated emotional crises, or makes you feel guilty for taking care of yourself, Jung would say, this person is projecting their own shadow self onto you, and you don't need to carry someone else's shadow. Information boundary. Not everything in your life needs to be shared. If someone uses personal information against you, distorts your words, or spreads your vulnerability as gossip, Jung would recommend cut off access. Toxic people can only use against you what you voluntarily hand over. And here's the most important part. Boundaries only work if you maintain them consistently. If you set a boundary and then cave because the person makes a scene, whines, threatens, or makes you feel guilty, Jung would warn you, you've just taught that person that your boundaries aren't real, and they'll push even further next time. Establishing boundaries isn't cruelty, it's self-preservation. And Jung knew that without clear boundaries, you become a permanent target for those who seek psychological victims. But even with boundaries, there's a subtle trap that Jung identified and that 90% of people don't notice until they're completely exhausted. And this third form of protection might be the hardest to accept. Strategy 3. Practice conscious detachment. Jung taught a brutal truth. You can't save anyone who doesn't want to be saved. And toxic people rarely want real change. They want control, attention, validation, but they don't want to do the inner work necessary to grow. Here's the trap. You see the person's potential. You see moments where they seem to improve. And you think, if I'm just more patient, more understanding, more loving, they'll finally change. Jung would call this an unhealthy fusion, where you abandon your own psychological boundaries to try and fix someone else. Recent psychological studies on codependency confirm this. The more you try to change someone, the more emotionally entangled you become. And toxic people, energy vampires, love that entanglement because while you're focused on saving them, they're draining you. Jung developed a technique he called conscious detachment. It's not cruel abandonment. It's not cold indifference. It's a strategic decision to emotionally separate your well-being from whether the other person changes or doesn't change. It works like this. You observe the toxic behavior without getting emotionally involved. You recognize this person is being manipulative right now, but you don't try to fix them. You don't try to convince them. You don't desperately try to make them see reason. You simply observe, protect your own boundaries, and energetically detach. Jung said the collective unconscious programs us to seek connection. But when connection becomes emotional imprisonment, protection requires detachment. And detachment requires accepting a painful truth. You are not responsible for saving anyone, not even people you love. And if you're thinking, but isn't that selfish? Let me show you what Jung would say. Taking care of yourself first is not selfishness. It's a prerequisite for any healthy interaction, because if you're broken trying to fix others, you have nothing genuine to offer anyone, not even yourself. But detachment alone isn't enough if you don't understand the fourth form of protection, and this will reveal why you attract toxic people repeatedly. Form 4. Working your own shadow self. Jung dedicated years to studying the shadow self, the dark, repressed part of the personality that contains everything we deny about ourselves. And he made a devastating discovery. Until you integrate your own shadow self, you will continue attracting people who personify exactly what you haven't resolved internally. Here's the pattern Jung identified. If you're afraid of being rejected, you attract people who cyclically reject you. If you're afraid of being controlled, you attract compulsive controllers. If you have a shadow self of low self-worth, you attract people who exploit and diminish you. This isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility. And the difference between guilt and responsibility is the difference between continuing to be a victim or becoming someone toxic people can no longer manipulate. Working your shadow self means asking brutal questions. Why do I accept this treatment? What belief about myself allows me to tolerate disrespect? What part of me believes I don't deserve better? What fear keeps me trapped in this dynamic? Recent research on Jungian therapy shows that shadow self-integration is one of the most transformative processes for victims of narcissistic abuse. Because when you illuminate your shadow self, when you confront your fears and limiting beliefs, you stop emitting the unconscious signals that toxic people hunt for. Jung taught a practical technique. When you feel emotionally triggered by someone, especially with intense anger or fear, ask, what is this person mirroring back to me that I don't want to see? The answer isn't always comfortable, but it's always liberating. And here's the plot twist. It's not that you are the problem. It's that, while your shadow self remains unintegrated, you'll be vulnerable to those who exploit exactly those unresolved parts. But when you work on this, when you integrate your shadow self, their power over you dissolves. Toxic people only have power over those with internal blind spots. And Jung's fourth form of protection is eliminating those blind spots through brutal, honest self-awareness. Now that you understand the first 4 forms of protection from Jung, the next 3 will show you how to apply all of this in everyday life when you inevitably cross paths with toxic people. And the 5th form will reveal the most important skill that Jung taught for psychological self-defense. Form 5. Trusting your intuition. Jung made a revolutionary discovery about the unconscious mind. It processes information that your conscious mind hasn't even captured yet. That inexplicable unease around certain people, Jung would say, it's your unconscious detecting danger signals that your rational mind is ignoring, because it doesn't want to appear paranoid or mean. Here's the problem that Jung identified. You've been trained to distrust your intuition. When you sense something off about someone, but that person seems pleasant on the surface, you dismiss the feeling as an exaggeration. And toxic people count on exactly that self-censorship. Recent research on intuition and unconscious processing confirms this. Your unconscious detects microfacial expressions, subtle voice tones, behavioral inconsistencies, and language patterns that your conscious mind doesn't register. And when something doesn't add up, Your body warns you through physical and emotional discomfort. Jung called this synchronicity between the unconscious and the environment. And he taught, when your body is tense, when your stomach clenches, when you feel drained even without an apparent reason around someone, that's valuable information. Do not ignore it. The technique that Jung recommended: observe how your body reacts to specific people. Do you relax or become tense? Do you feel energized or exhausted? Do you feel safe to be authentic, or do you need to monitor every word? And before you say, "But I might be being unfair," let me show you what Jung would say. Intuition isn't moral judgment. It's an early warning system. You might be wrong about the person's motives, but your unconscious is rarely wrong about the impact that person has on you. And impact is what matters for protection. The biggest mistake you make is rationalizing negative intuitions. Oh, she was just having a bad day. He didn't mean it that way. I must be too sensitive. And while you're rationalizing, the toxicity is penetrating your psychological defenses. Jung taught, honor your instincts, because until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. And if your unconscious is screaming danger, the fifth form of protection is to listen without question. But intuition alone isn't enough if you don't understand the sixth form, and this will explain why toxic people always come back when you try to pull away. Form 6. Implementing real consequences. Jung observed something fascinating. Toxic people don't change because of promises, therapy, or good intentions. They only change or back off when they face tangible consequences for their destructive behaviors. And here's where most people go wrong. You say you're going to set boundaries, but you don't apply consequences when those boundaries are violated. You threaten to leave the relationship, but you always go back. You say you won't tolerate certain behavior anymore, but you keep tolerating it when the person throws a tantrum or manipulates you with guilt. Jung would say, consequences without application are not consequences, they're bluffs. And toxic people test your bluffs constantly until they discover they can ignore everything you say without losing access to you. Research on behavioral modification confirms it. Behaviors only change when there's a real cost associated with them. And if the cost of treating you badly is zero, because you always forgive, always give more chances, always accept empty apologies, there's no reason for the person to change. The practical application that Jung taught: identify what behavior is unacceptable. Communicate clearly. Once. If this happens again, this will be the consequence. And when it happens again, because it will happen, you apply the consequence without negotiation, without discussion, without giving one more chance. Examples of real consequences that Jung would recommend: if someone repeatedly disrespects you in public, you stop going to public events with that person. If someone constantly violates your privacy, you cut off access to personal information. If someone drains you emotionally, but is never available when you need them, you drastically reduce the availability you offer. And the most powerful consequence that Jung identified: distance, not as punishment, but as self-preservation. If someone proves repeatedly that they don't respect you, Jung would ask you, why do you keep giving this person unrestricted access to you? Here's the hardest part to accept. Implementing consequences will cause the toxic person to escalate manipulative behaviors. They'll accuse you of being cruel, insensitive, exaggerated. They'll throw intense emotional tantrums. They'll threaten, beg, make grand promises of change. Jung called this a rupture crisis of toxic homeostasis. The dynamic was working perfectly for the toxic person. Now you're changing the rules, and they'll fight fiercely to return to the status quo where they had total control. And it's exactly at this point that you need the seventh and last form of protection from Jung, the most powerful of all. Form 7, accept that some people cannot be saved. Jung studied the human psyche for decades and came to a brutal conclusion. Some people are so entangled in their own shadow self, so identified with their false social mask, so resistant to the process of individuation, that genuine change is almost impossible without total psychological collapse. This doesn't mean these people are evil. Jung didn't think in terms of good and evil. He thought in terms of conscious and unconscious. And some people are so submerged in the unconscious mind that awakening would be so painful that their psychological system prefers to destroy those around them than to face their own truth. And here's the most liberating truth that Jung can give you. You are not responsible for anyone's journey of individuation besides your own. You can offer compassion. You can establish psychological boundaries. You can hope the person wakes up, but you cannot force them awake. And attempts to force awakening in those who aren't ready only result in more suffering, mainly for you. Psychological studies on personality change confirm it. Narcissists rarely change, not because they're biologically incapable, but because change requires humility, self-criticism, and admission of failure. And the narcissistic psychological structure is built specifically to avoid these three things at any cost. Jung taught a devastating but necessary practice. Observe long-term patterns, not momentary promises. If someone promises change for years, but the behavior remains the same, Jung would tell you, believe the behavior, not the words. And the most difficult application of the seventh form, accept that love isn't enough. You can love someone deeply and still have to walk away to survive psychologically, because love without reciprocity, without mutual growth, without basic respect, isn't a relationship. It's self-sacrifice disguised as virtue. Jung was clear about this. The process of individuation, of becoming who you really are, sometimes requires brutally difficult decisions. And one of those decisions is recognizing when someone is actively impeding your psychological growth and having the courage to choose yourself. Now you know the 7 forms of psychological protection that Jung taught, but knowledge without application is just information. And information doesn't protect you. Action protects you. You just received decades of Jungian wisdom condensed into minutes. Wisdom that can save you from years of suffering in toxic relationships. Wisdom that most people will never find because they're obsessed with superficial motivation and pop psychology that doesn't touch on uncomfortable truths. This type of content isn't popular because truth is uncomfortable, because responsibility is scary, because change requires confronting parts of ourselves that we'd prefer to ignore. And this type of content only survives if people like you, who understand the value of real psychological protection, decide to support it. The super thanks down there isn't just financial support. It's you saying, this information is worth more than expensive therapy. That never gets to the point. It's you saying, I want more content that empowers me, not that keeps me dependent on false hopes. It's you saying, I'm part of those who protect themselves with wisdom, not with denial. When you click that golden heart, you're investing in one of the few channels that has the courage to apply real psychology to real situations without romanticizing toxicity. And you're becoming part of a community that has chosen conscious protection over unconscious victimization. Now comes the practical part that you can start applying today. And I'm going to give you an exact protocol based on the 7 forms of Jung that you just learned. Immediate Psychological Protection Protocol. Step 1. Make an inventory of relationships. List the people you interact with regularly. Next to each name, answer honestly. How do I feel after interacting with this person? Energized or drained? Valued or diminished? Respected or manipulated? If you consistently feel worse after interactions with someone, Jung would warn you, your unconscious mind has already identified toxicity. Your conscious mind needs to accept what your body already knows. Step 2. Identify one psychological boundary that you need to establish today. Not 3, not 7. 1. Choose the most urgent, the person who drains you the most or violates you, and formulate that boundary in a crystal clear way. If X happens, I will do Y. There is no negotiation. There are no exceptions. It's a decision, not a request. Step 3. Communicate the boundary once, clearly, calmly, without over-justifying. Don't apologize for having needs. Jung taught that boundaries aren't a punishment, they're information. You're communicating how things will be moving forward, not asking permission to have needs. It's about asserting, not requesting. Step 4. Observe the reaction. If the person immediately respects your boundaries, accepts them without drama, and modifies their behavior, you're dealing with someone who values you. But if they create drama, accuse you, manipulate you, or completely ignore your boundaries, you've gained valuable insight into who they really are. And Carl Jung would tell you, believe that information. Trust what you see, not just what you hear. Step 5. Enforce the consequence if a boundary is violated. No additional warnings, no more chances. You stated you would do Y if X occurred. X has now occurred, therefore you must do Y. This is the only way to establish that your boundaries are real and non-negotiable. Show. Don't just tell. Step 6. Concurrently, work on your shadow self. Ask yourself brutally honest questions. Why have I tolerated this for so long? What fear keeps me trapped? What belief about myself allows me to accept less than I deserve? And when you uncover these answers, address them. Pursue Jungian therapy. Engage in journaling. Practice honest self-analysis. Because as long as your shadow self remains unintegrated, you'll remain vulnerable. Facing your shadow is key to lasting change. Step 7. Monitor for real change, not just empty promises. Over the next 90 days, observe actions, not just words. If someone promises change but their behavior remains the same, you have your answer. And the answer is, this person is not ready for genuine growth, and you must decide whether you'll wait indefinitely or prioritize your own psychological well-being. Your mental health matters most. If you consistently implement this protocol for 3 months, Jung would assure you your life will change dramatically, not because toxic people will magically disappear, but because you'll stop being an easy target. You'll stop tolerating the intolerable. You'll stop sacrificing your sanity for those who don't deserve access to you. It's about reclaiming your power. And here's the outcome that Carl Jung observed repeatedly. When you consistently protect yourself, one of 2 things happens. Either the toxic person withdraws because you've stopped feeding the destructive dynamic, or they attempt minimal adaptation to maintain access to you. And both outcomes are victories for your psychological health. You either get space or they start respecting your boundaries. It's a win-win. I'll leave you with the most powerful statement that Jung ever wrote about relationships. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Translating this, if someone constantly irritates you, drains you, manipulates you, or destroys you, ask yourself, what is this teaching me about myself, about my needs, about my boundaries, about my shadow self? What lessons can I extract? And when you answer these questions honestly, You'll have done more for your psychological protection than years spent trying to change someone who doesn't want to change. Self-awareness is powerful. How many of these 7 steps do you currently implement in your life? Comment with a number from 1 to 7, without mentioning names, without giving details, just the number, because your answer will show you exactly how much work you still have to do, and it might inspire others to begin as well. Let's create a wave of self-awareness.